Welcome to This Dementia Life, a monthly podcast created by the Dementia Action Alliance. I'm your host, Chuck McClatchey, and I live my dementia life with Alzheimer's disease. During these podcasts, we will have conversations with inspiring people living with dementia and from people who care about us. I'm so excited. My first guest is my good friend, Mike Belleville. Mike is a staunch advocate for dementia awareness and is an incredible artist. So Mike, why don't you kind of introduce yourself, and I'll even ask you your first question. What made you pick up that paintbrush for the first time?
Hey Chuck, how you doing? It's great to be here. I'm really excited to be on This Dementia Life for my second time actually, but specifically to talk about art. For those who don't know me, I was diagnosed with younger onset Alzheimer's when I was 52, and that diagnosis changed 3 years ago to Lewy Body dementia. I'm 57 now. Proud and honored to actually be on the board of directors and the advisory board for DAA. And I'm also involved with a number of other different dementia organizations, but this is where my heart is. But to answer your question, why did I pick up a brush? That's a great question. One thing I learned early on, I should say not right away, but one thing I did learn early on was that the best thing that someone can do as a person living with dementia is to stay socially engaged, and that's to do something. So within a couple of days of when I retired from work, I walked into my local senior center, and because I have a tech background, I walked in and asked them who they had that someone was helping them, the seniors population, with their computers or technical issues, and they didn't have anybody, so I volunteered. And we started a great little group. They call us Mike's Google Gals. And I had a great number of adopted grandparents, which I absolutely love. I'm still actually in touch with a few of them now and again. But I start with that because every Thursday morning, we would all sit around a table and I would help folks individually. I could still help people doing things one at a time. I can't multitask, but as long as I'm helping one person at a time, we seem to be able to help get through the problems. Well, that class would last about an hour and a half. And the class they always had after that was an art class. And they had always encouraged me to stick around to do some painting or to do some art. Now, ever since I was a kid, I could draw, but I've never picked up a brush in my life. For some reason, painting always intimidated me. But they finally encouraged me enough to stick around. And what the first class that they were having was a reverse on glass with painting with oil. So you're basically painting backwards. So I looked at them and said, "You got to be kidding me, right? Let's paint backwards for the first time. Never mind trying to do it with some challenges." But I did it, and it came out pretty good, and I really enjoyed it. But I swore I would never do that again. The second painting I did was an acrylic, and that came out pretty nice. But the third painting I did was a watercolor, and that's the medium that I fell in love with. Sadly, after that third painting, Cheryl and I and our son Jacob moved to a new town. And I did not pick up my brushes for about a year and a half. It wasn't until March of this past year when our oldest daughter told me that our oldest grandchild, who was turning 8, loves giraffes. So I decided to draw and paint her a giraffe. I did. She absolutely loved it. It came out pretty cool, I'll admit. But what I learned was that you can't paint something for one grandchild without painting something for all your grandchildren. So I proceeded to then start painting things for my other grandchildren. And as I was doing that, I was actually putting them up online on Facebook. And I was getting some pretty good response from people. They were like, did you do that? Or how did you do that? And before you know it, I started getting requests from people. Well, can you paint my cat? Can you this? Can you paint that for me? And I love doing it. The thing that I found completely by chance was that I normally, almost every day, I have a hard time with anxiety and agitation, especially like in the afternoon, early evening. And I found after doing a number of these paintings that as long as I was drawing or painting or even just thinking about what project I wanted to work on, that agitation and anxiety would just slow right down. So it actually turned out to be a therapy thing for me. So it's something I love to do. I enjoy doing. I love being able to give somebody a gift that they enjoy, but at the same time, I'm getting something out of it. So I know that was a long-winded answer, and I apologize, but that's pretty much how I got started. So since March, I think I've painted a total of 25, 27 different paintings, all in watercolor. For some for fundraisers, some for upon request, people asked me to do something for them. Others were, the majority I did for gifts, to give to people.
Okay, the second question, I've always been amazed with artists, how they can take something in their mind and somehow send it down to their fingers and through something and put it on a piece of paper. When you paint, do you just visualize it in your head, or can you actually visualize it on the paper before you start?
That's a great question. I usually almost always visualize it in my head of what I think I want the end result to be. The thing that I love about it, especially with watercolor, is that rarely happens. Because especially with watercolor, that you're probably not going to get exactly the shading you wanted or the exact color you wanted. But the cool thing is that it's kind of a journey. Every painting is like a journey. And you find out that sometimes just by mistake, you're painting something that's like, ooh, I like that effect. And you just kind of leave it alone. And then you try to duplicate it somewhere else in the painting. But for the most part, I try to visualize in my head what I think it's going to look like and try to get it as close as possible to that as I can. I'll be honest with you, I'm not really great at painting something just on a piece of paper, on a blank piece of paper. I have to have some kind of a sketch. So what I'll do is, lately I've drawn a few portraits of people. And that was another thing that was kind of scary is, like I said, I've always been able to draw since I was a kid. But I always drew cartoons. Wouldn't even think about drawing people. I mean, it's one thing to draw a cat, and anybody can look at it and go, hey, that's a cat. But if I try to draw and paint a picture of Chuck, it damn well better look like Chuck, okay? Otherwise, people are going to say, who the heck is that? So that always intimidated me. But sadly, I lost a very, very dear friend of mine earlier this year to Alzheimer's. And something just, kind of hit me. And I think it was more therapy for me than anything, but that I had to draw and paint his portrait, which I did, and I gave it to his wife as a gift, and it came out pretty good. So the point I want to get to about aspiring is having a sketch or even a picture to look at, so I can base what it is I'm trying to accomplish as far as color or shading. I mean, color, the thing that's cool about color is you can change that as you go along. It doesn't have to look exactly like the picture. A portrait obviously does. I mean, it should resemble the person, but you can still change things up a little bit to put your own little unique twist on it. And I guess that's how people kind of find their, what I've been told is their style. You know, some people can look at a really phenomenal artist and know that that's so and so, or they could listen to music and just know that that's who the particular artist is, because they're able to put their own little unique stamp on it. I don't know that I'm able to do that yet, but I do feel like I'm developing my own style.
Okay, now another question I have. Um, when you do the paintings, do you find it easier if you have an emotional attachment to what you're painting? Because I've seen the one you did for your granddaughter, and it's amazing. So is it easier to do when you have kind of an emotional attachment to whatever you're painting?
That's a fantastic question, Chuck. And boy, did you hit the nail on the head. Absolutely, it has a huge effect on what I'm doing. Especially again, if it's for one of my grandchildren or for somebody who I care about. I really, I'm not trying to get overly whatever, but I really do put my heart into it. I mean, I really do put as much as I can into it because I really want it to look as good or as nice as possible. Especially the portraits that I've done with actually every portrait that I've done with the exception of one or two, sadly have been people who have passed away from some form of dementia. Either I knew them personally or I knew their care partner. And I wanted to do it as a memento or a gift, to them. So when you're doing something like that, I don't think you can't help but get invested into the process of what you're doing and the commitment to want it to look as nice and as good as possible. So I like to think that every painting that I've done definitely has a little piece of me inside it, because I've really given it a piece of myself to try to for the person that I'm doing it for. So that's a great question.
Okay, another thing, when you go to the finer aspects of painting, putting in the eyes, and I've seen a bird that you did, putting in the feathers, do you kind of pencil a little bit of that in to give you an idea of how it goes, or is that just all kind of freehand and how you envision it in your mind?
I put the base down, if you will, like where the eye might start, the roundness of it, the size of it. But everything else is pretty much done on the fly, I guess, if you want to call it that. There's certain parts of, and again, I'm learning this as I go along. I never went to school for, I shouldn't say that. I took commercial art for 1 year in high school, but I never went to college and majored in art or did anything like that, art theory. But there's certain paintings, certain parts of a painting that you want to have speak out to people, and no matter if it's an animal or a bird or a person, the eyes are what tells the story. So usually a painting like that, if it's of an animal or bird, or especially a person, I always start with the eyes, because I want that to, if I can lock that in and it looks like, wow, that person's there, then I know the rest of the painting is just going to flow from there. It's just going to go.
Okay, my last question. When you do these works of art, and they're incredible, what does that do for you when people tell you how nice they are, and it's got to be very satisfying. How does it feel?
It feels actually phenomenal. I mean, the whole process of painting itself, I've told folks with this disease, it's easy to get lost during the day. And you know that, you've experienced that yourself. And you could be sitting here, I could be sitting on my computer and not even realize, next thing I know, Cheryl's knocking on the, coming in the door, and I hadn't even eaten lunch yet. I kind of lose that whole thing. So you really lose a sense of what the heck was it? Where have I been the last 4 or 5 hours? And that same feeling when I get lost in a painting, when I'm doing a painting, that same thing happens. But what's phenomenal about it is that I can look down at it and look at what I've been able to accomplish in the last 4 or 5 or 6 hours, and knew that I did something meaningful and purposeful. It's kind of a weird, I don't know how exactly to explain it properly, but the feedback that I've been getting from folks has just been, it's been incredible. Learning to say thank you to people is, is one thing to do, but I really feel like, the feedback I've gotten from folks has been genuine and sincere. And I've been commissioned by a few folks to actually do paintings for them, and that says a lot. I just did a painting for a fundraiser for an FTD art gala in Boston this past week. And it was a painting from a picture that I had actually taken of these boats in Portland, Maine. And I think one of the best compliments I've ever gotten so far, I've gotten a lot of beautiful, wonderful, compliments, but this young couple were staring at the painting because I was one of the featured artists. And I happened to be walking up to where my paintings were, and he looked, and they had a picture of me with my story, so they knew it was me. And this was a young kid in his early 20s. And he looked and he said, "You're the artist." And I said, "Yeah." And he was looking at the picture I did specifically for this particular function. And he said, "The picture of the boats, is that in Maine?" I said, "Yeah, it is." He said, "Is it in Portland?" I said, "Holy cow." I said, "Yeah." I said, it's from the picture I took. And I didn't even have a chance to get the words out of my mouth. He says, "Yeah, in downtown Portland." And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "I know exactly where that is." He says, "I went to school around there and spent 2 years there." And he says, "I used to walk up and down Main Street. I know exactly where that was." He says, "That's amazing." I was like cloud nine. I was like, holy cow, somebody I'd never even met in my life looks at a painting and knew exactly where it was and where it came from. I think that's one of the highest forms of a compliment, I guess, that you could get from somebody. And it obviously, I'd be lying if I didn't tell you it didn't make me feel good. And I was, the endorphins were wee in my head, and I was having a great night. It wasn't from the wine I drank, trust me. But yeah, so it's been a great ride so far. I'm gonna continue doing it for as long as I can. I love doing it, and I love challenging myself to try to do things I haven't done before and try to get better at it.
Hey, Mike, I have one question. Are you going to enter some of your work in the DAA Art Festival?
Yeah, I do plan on entering something into the DAA Art Festival that's going to be shown at the DAA conference in Atlanta, Georgia next June. I was also asked and flattered to be asked to actually paint the logo that's actually being used for the DAA Art Festival. And we'll include a link to the conference and the DAA Art Festival, because there's going to be a call out to entries for people. Anybody who's living with any form of dementia that wants to show their art, doesn't have to be a painting, but just go to the website. It explains everything you need to know and how to enter. And we highly encourage anybody to do that. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a great art festival. So thanks for asking.
Well, Mike, I want to thank you so much for being here. We could talk for hours on this. You're just a super conversationalist. Is there anything you want to leave our viewers with?
Actually, yeah, there is, Chuck. I know I mentioned earlier about when I retired from work and how I went to the senior center and got volunteered, and how important I believe social engagement is. I honestly believe that even anybody who's been given this diagnosis, any form of dementia, has to be socially engaged, doing something. Now, even though I'm painting and I'm doing that by myself, I'm always thinking of the person that I'm doing it for. And for me, that's a way of staying socially connected and socially engaged. And I can't stress enough the importance of people with this diagnosis to stay engaged in doing something that they love. It could be volunteering at your senior center. It could be playing golf. It could be painting. It could be gardening. It could, and no matter what it is, you really need to stay engaged and keep that brain muscle working. I'm no doctor, but I honestly believe that that's really helped keep the progression from going quicker than what it has. But that's just a way I feel. But for anybody that's got this diagnosis, do something. So thanks for having me on. This was a great talk, and I agree with you. We could talk for another 2 hours. But congratulations on hosting, and I know what a phenomenal job you're going to do, and look forward to working with you again in the future.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. You're an awesome person, a great advocate, and the perfect first guest. I want to thank you very much. I'd like to thank you for joining us today on This Dementia Life. You can view other podcasts on our website, daanow.org, and click on podcasts. I'm your host, Chuck McClatchey, and remember, the brain may forget, but the heart remembers. See you next time.